millions of her cells to test for possible side effects in their new products. The American military placed large flasks of HeLa cells next to atomic tests. They wanted to see what the effects of radiation would be on human tissue. And then came polio. HeLa cells were the perfect host on which to grow and study the polio virus. From this came the development of the vaccine that conquered the disease. And polio raised a further question. Might cancer too be caused by a virus? And if it was, could it too be cured?
It was hoped in the 50s that a virus could be discovered that had been a major cause of cancer and a vaccine developed to that virus to control cancer. And because Henrietta Lacks's cells were cancerous, they had to have the secret of what cancer was and how you could kill it.
The first step was to find out whether, like polio, cancer was infectious. Two scientists went to a maximum security prison in Ohio. They took with them large quantities of Henrietta Lacks's cells.
This is the first suspension that we'll be using this morning, and down at the bottom here you can see quite a pellet of concentrated cancer cells. This material, the suspension of cells, will then be taken up into a tuberculin syringe and merely injected underneath the skin of the forearm through an area that has been anesthetized with Novocaine.
They were inoculating them with HeLa cells under the skin to see if the HeLa cells would grow and cause a cancer. It seemed a very eminently reasonable thing to do. How else are you going to find out if HeLa cells, in fact, do, spread and cause cancer?
Well, why did you volunteer for this?
My grandmother, my father both died of cancer. I believe that wrong that I have done in the eyes of society this might make a right on it. I don't know.
Some of the prisoners developed small tumours, but not full-blown cancer. The results were inconclusive.
When they cut out the lower one on my arm, you can see here, the top one, they called me back after 14 days, and it did not have to be removed. It had died out in my system. So that is, they think that there's what they're trying to find, immunity to it.
But then other evidence emerged that seemed to prove there really might be a cancer virus. Henrietta Lacks was no longer alone in the cell world. Suddenly it seemed very easy to grow cells outside the body. Some were cancerous, others were normal. This is a heart cell growing inside a petri dish. Each cell is beating with the same rhythm as the heart from which it came.
Out of this original push, attempts now proliferated everywhere to grow human cells, and many of them were successful. By God, they had cells from lung, and they had cells suddenly growing and rapidly from a variety, a whole spectrum of human tissues.
I had prostate surgery, and since the prostate grows so well in the body, I thought, well, it should be able to grow pretty well in our laboratory. So I made arrangements to have the surgeon cut off a piece of the prostate that is removed, mince it up with scissors, very fine, sharp scissors, in a sterile glass fashion. Because the finer you mince, the better you have, the better chance you have of getting a better yield of cells.
In the hunt to start new cell lines, other cell biologists turned to their own families.
I decided that I would try to establish a cell line from the amnion at the birth of one of my children. And on the day of my daughter's birth, I appeared with my wife and the collecting materials, which I gave to the nurse. And the material was duly collected. I took it back to the laboratory after assuring myself that my wife and new daughter were healthy. And within a few hours, I could look through the microscope and see the cells from my daughter's amnion.
Then the strangest thing began to happen. Many of the normal cell lines suddenly developed cancer. Normal cells lying open in the laboratory would abruptly transform into malignant cancer cells. It became known as spontaneous transformation.
I observed in the culture an island of cells that looked different from the normal cell population. Because of my experience with cells by that time, I knew that this was what we then called a spontaneous transformation. That is, the spontaneous acquisition of cancer cell properties by a normal cell in culture.
There was now a growing belief that inside malignant cell lines like Henrietta Lacks's was a cancer virus. If it could be found and isolated, cancer would be conquered. But it was going to take a great deal of money. Help came from a woman called Mary Lasker. She was a Millionaire Society hostess in New York.
I think this is one of the most exciting still lifes that Matisse ever did. It's full of color and warmth. I have some pictures here by Cézanne and Manet and Renoir.
Lasker's husband had died of cancer. Since then, she had devoted herself to a crusade. She wanted the government to fund a vast project, like the space program, to cure cancer.
Believe it or not, the amount of money that's being spent for medical research is, well, it's just piddling. And you won't believe this, less is spent on cancer research than we spend on chewing gum.
But cancer was low on the political agenda. To persuade the politicians, Mary Lasker needed to find the promise of a simple cure. Then one of her scientist friends, Matilda Krim, told her about the virus cancer theory.
To Mary Lasker, the virus theory of cancer was very exciting when she heard of it. It seemed to offer a point of attack to the cancer problem, you know. Knowing the enemy is always useful. She called me one day and she says, Matilda, we have to push this campaign for cancer research because this is something the public will be in favor of. Everybody's afraid of cancer. We together started this campaign for cancer research.
I'm Bing Crosby, and I am on stage. And that means the show's begun.
Lasker and Krim turned to Hollywood. They persuaded the stars to appear in network television shows. Their job was to speak publicly about the thing of which everyone was terrified.
Today, I'm 53 years old. I have a family consisting of 6 kids and a wife whom I adore. And I also have lung cancer.
You are nobody till somebody loves you.
Their other task was to broadcast the confident promises of the scientists.
It is my belief that we are now witnessing the beginning of a great explosion of knowledge about this disease, which will culminate in its complete control.
Even if I'm gone when you see me speak these words to you, let me join you in this crusade, and let's make this world a world that's cancer-free.
But at the very moment when the stars were promising the end of cancer, the cell biologists realized there was something seriously wrong with their science. And the reason was Henrietta Lacks and her cells. It began when a scientist called Stanley Gartler examined many of the major cell lines. He discovered that all of them secreted the same form of enzyme. It was a type found only in black people. The problem was that all the cell lines he looked at came from whites. The only black cell line was Henrietta Lacks. At a packed meeting of cell biologists, Gartler announced the inescapable conclusion.
He told them, folks, cell lines that are presumably derived from other tissues in different individuals are not such. These are cells from Henrietta Lacks. If you think you have been working with breast cells, you're wrong. If you think you've been working with lung cells, you're wrong. And kidney cells, you're wrong. You're working with cells derived from a human female uterus. And that's that. And it was very embarrassing, and it's very shocking to many people, and there was a great alarum.
I couldn't believe it. He was saying that this enzyme is present only among blacks. So, ergo, this tissue did not come from you, you're white. It must have come from black. If it came from black, it probably came from HeLa. So you mixed your cells with HeLa.